New at 6, Florida Senator Rick Scott has once again introduced a bill to apply more sanctions and financial pressure on the Cuban government. Scott said part of that pressure includes once again restricting flights to Cuba.
CBS News Miami's Yvonne Taylor live at Miami International Airport, where he has the exclusive interview with the Florida politician and reactions. Yvonne, why restrictions on the trips?
Yes, a very good question, Chelsea and Elliot. Well, Florida Senator Rick Scott says that when people travel to Cuba, basically those that are close to the government, and according to him, mainly the military, benefit from this. And the senator says that the funds are used to repress those against the government.
It wouldn't be like the best for a lot of people.
Orestes Pedraza's wife is in Cuba. On Friday, he took one of the many flights to Havana. He thinks Cuban people should not pay the price for the repressive policy of their government.
I don't want nothing like bad to like our family in Cuba.
All of our problems in Latin America start with the Cuban regime.
Senator Rick Scott says by sanctioning Cuba, the U.S. strangles dictators in Venezuela and Nicaragua.
You can get rid of the Castro regime. It helps us get rid of the Maduro regime and get rid of Ortega.
Scott recently introduced a bill called Democracy Act. It provides asset and visa blocking sanctions to specific Cuban government sectors like the military and those linked to the government, especially after the repression of July 11, 2021, when many Cubans were arrested. Orlando Gutierrez from the Assembly of Cuban Resistance believes Republicans are on the right track.
These sanctions strike at an elite government that purports to be socialist, but in reality is an oligarchy that feeds off the Cuban people.
I'm very optimistic that we're going to get it passed this time.
During the past Republican administrations, we have seen tighter measures against the Cuban regime, which they have included also traveling restrictions to the island.
In 2019 and 2020, the Trump administration issued a series of flight restrictions against Cuba. That included barring U.S. carriers from flying to 8 international airports in the island.
Would you support a policy like that again?
I don't think we should have any travel to Cuba. If you want to move back to Cuba, move back to Cuba. It doesn't help the people of Cuba. It helps the regime oppress the people of Cuba.
It's true that we will be affected because we have family there. But at the same time, I understand the U.S. needs to pressure the Cuban government, said Joelski Estrada. She and her husband were flying to Havana because her father-in-law is gravely ill. They acknowledge if travel restrictions are established, they would not be able to go.
So I asked Senator Rick Scott if the flying restrictions is something that he will be pushing for, when and how soon, and he basically said yes, and he hopes that it'll happen before the end of the year. We are live at MIA. Yvonne Taylor, CBS News, Miami.